Welcome to TGIF.
Here we are, First Chronicles. Can you believe it? If you've been with us, you know we've been going through the books of the Bible. If you're just seeing this for the first time, you can go back and catch up. We spend anywhere from 4 to 6 episodes per book in the Bible. So yes, this is going to be years, but First Chronicles, we have made it here. And you might be thinking, what in the world is First Chronicles? Or maybe you've taken a peek and you've opened it and you quickly closed it because you saw a bunch of names that represent one big...
Takes us to the word of the day, which is family.
I mean, some people have 5, 6 kids. I'm thinking, wow, that's a big family. Or I talk to people who have like 20 grandkids and I'm like, how in the world do we just have 2? So I've heard situations and stories of like some big families, but oh, and goodness, this genealogy, wow.
And so we are looking at genealogies, and the thing about them is that they're looking at the tribes. And so the chronicler is basically trying to lay out for us here in the first, there's 8 chapters of basically just family lineage and looking at it. But it gets us into a good conversation. So I think we're going to enjoy where we're headed today, because tracing our family tree can reveal a lot of things. But for the chronicler, he's trying to get us from Adam to King David in this First Chronicles. So that's what we're going to focus on in the First Chronicles, and then we'll go to Second Chronicles and look at the next piece of material that he has for us. So we're looking at First Chronicle kind of at the end of our reading, because like I said, it was just names and genealogies and understanding how they all kind of fit together, these genealogies. So we're looking at First Chronicles chapter 9, verse 2. Now the first to live again in their possession, in their towns, were Israelites, priests, Levites, and temple servants. So you have this group that is establishing, you're like, wait, this isn't Adam. Where are we at? Where are we at in the story? And so the chronicler is trying to engage us then in this place where we're trying to get to King David's story and how King David come on the scene. So you got all these listings of the tribes, so you kind of know what tribe and how they were made up and all the different components of that. And so now we're into, let's begin to understand where King David falls in this. Remember, First and Second Kings, we were looking at a bunch of the kings. That's basically what the chronicler there was focusing on, which are the kings. Now you might say, well, this seems like a kind of a repeat in some way. Well, it is, because we've got to remember, even like the gospel message, we have the gospel message come in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, right? So it's maybe a little bit different look at it, but this one, again, like I said, really focused on the families and focusing on the families and how they're related. So finding connections to the past can be hard. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's exciting because I mean, how about if you're related to some famous person? And it's like, wow, that's going to be cool. But for us, in the chronicler, it wants us to understand God's story, how God weaved, even in the tragedies, even if you were like related to, oh my gosh, I'm related to that person. God was finding, what we see is the chronicler finding these weavings of God at work in all these family trees, good, bad, or indifferent. So if you come from a family that's good, bad, or indifferent, you're not like any other, you're no different than any other family. And so the chronicler is revealing for us the purposefulness of God that ties parents and children over centuries and centuries. And that's what we're trying to do, is find God's weaving in and out of all these storylines. So here we set all of these storylines. What do we do with it? Well, maybe we look at our own family trees and try to start looking at what that looks like. The process of looking at families often is, and in this specific case, restoration. Where does restoration come each time? And restoration always comes with a realignment to God. And so our family tree, if it's somewhere in the past, you're looking at your own family trees and say, wow, they never even really revealed they knew Christ or were followers of Christ. That's the great thing about each generation has that opportunity to bring restoration to their family, no matter what, and connect with God.
Absolutely. Do we do it all the time, or do we focus on looking at the brokenness in our own family history and dynamics? in different situations. I know with my dad, when he was in the hospital for multiple months before he passed, when we would go visit him, he would tell stories. And the stories would go back to his childhood. And it's like, wow, I didn't know that. But I love that I was able to hear them and to kind of get a sense of, okay, or even asking, okay, what was God doing then? Or having those conversations. Because the past is the past. There's no changing it. But being able to glean from it or understand more even about my dad in his elderly years, in his illness, through the stories. And then when you take our own family history and go all the way back to all the stories in the Bible, David and Goliath, I think of that story. One of the probably first stories, if you were to ask our kids, one of their first and most favorite Bible stories through Sunday school and VBS and such, David and Goliath. Like pretty much every child who is a part of a church should know the story of David and Goliath.
Talking about taking on that giant.
Exactly. And I think that was just the exciting. And how did he actually do that with just that sling and those stones? But the idea of how we can take from that and bring it into our own stories, because our family history has a Goliath within it. Whether it's through the stories we hear or the situations that we're in now, and the history over time just reveals the brokenness of the world. So sometimes I think, okay, we're working to have this perfect family. It ain't gonna happen. You might have a pretty darn perfect season. We love having grandbabies. We love when Jace got recently married. Those are seasons of, oh, it's so perfect, but the road ahead isn't gonna always be that. So that important idea of what is the most crucial thing within a family, it is that alignment with God and the family of God, just like you said, because I'd rather focus on the family of God and realigning with that than dwelling on, maybe the hard stuff my dad shared, that I hated that he had to go through that, or things that we went through or going through or will go through.
No, and I think even when you think about all of the different dynamics of families, there's a lot of adopted kids out there that they're like, who are my parents? I have this wonderful parents that are taking care of me, but where do I belong in this story? And you have to be able to be so confident and say, you're a part of Christ's story. You're part of God's story, and you have been woven into our family. So it's just like our own kids, our birth kids. It's like you can tell them, you've been woven into the story because of who Christ is. You have the greatest family tree of all time because Christ is the one who saved us and rescued us for all eternity. And I love that image. And so I think that anytime you start looking at your family tree, they are what they are, right? You cannot go back and change them.
Hot mess at times.
Yeah, exactly. But do we have the ability to place God first in the family right now? And every time you go back to all these stories, you see, and even when you look at these genealogies, it's like, oh, there's a name. That was an important name because that was when they realigned with God and the restoration began. Did it go perfect forever? Then there's another generation that comes along and they go the other way. But then there's always this restoration that's always going. So this ebb and flow, I think, is a place that we can live with our families and keep reminding them. Do you know the family you belong to when you receive Christ, that Christ is your Lord and Savior?
I like that. Restoration within family. It's not a one-time deal. It's not a one-time offer. Restoration within family, we've seen it in the history of the Bible and all of this lineage and genealogy that goes back. But we need to make sure that we are open and watching for it today through divorce, through death, through tragedy, through prodigal children. You name it, the list goes on. Y'all could probably tell us some stories of some real brokenness, but then you also could probably reflect and find where was that pinpoint of the restoration of that turn of where you found God at work. And then is that the story that you continue to tell? Like, I get this whole grandparent thing. Like, it's way better than raising your own kids. Although I do like, I just posted this the other day, the reason we love our grandkids so much is we get that reflection of their parent, our child, holding them at that age. But then we get to give them back and we get to sleep all night. So that's the best part. But I see how I feel like I'm going to do a much better job as a grandparent than a parent. Maybe it's just because I don't have the intense responsibility, but in terms of exactly what we're talking about today, of making sure that child knows they're in the family of God. They are connected. They are woven into the family of God. That family is perfect. This family is broken. Gigi and Pops is a pretty perfect household, but it's not the perfect that we need to focus on, and that is the family of God. Like, I look forward to that. Is it going to be easy? No way. But family, restoration is always right there, and we need to be looking forward. Because really, what is it? God at work and everything. So as we send you on to staying in First Chronicles, reading on, just continue on in chapter 10, and we'll be back with episode 2 next week. But as you're reflecting, because now we're going to get another set of names, right? A lineage again.
That's why we're kind of starting to start unpacking David's kingdom.
Okay.
And David, specifically David, to understand how David is connected with the bigger story.
Okay. So don't be so scared. It's a good story. Question. Do you see God at work in your family history? Like, spend time reflecting on that. You know, maybe you have someone else in your home with you that you can reflect on and look where God was at work, and then see that restoration point and share that with your grandkids or your adult child. Like my dad sharing some things with me that I didn't know. Maybe he told those stories a long time ago when I was younger, but they just made more of an impact now. Like the stories matter.
Yeah.
The stories in the Bible matter. All the stories, all the way back to Adam and Eve, matter. So make it a great week as you reflect on God at work in your family history and share that with someone you love. See you next time on TGIF. Bye.